I'm so glad to welcome you here to the Clark Howard Show. You know, our mission is to serve you with advice and information that empowers you so you make better financial decisions in your life. Today I'm going to begin by talking about the ugliness of the recent CrowdStrike outage and who had ever heard of them before this happened, and what you need to know to be prepared for what's going to happen in the future. I didn't say might happen in the future, what's going to happen in the future. And also, the number of Americans that are delinquent on debt is growing by a big amount right now, even as the economy has been growing better than virtually any economy anywhere in the world. Why are people having a personal train wreck financially while the economy is actually doing surprisingly well? I'm going to talk about that later. So CrowdStrike was something I only knew from the financial pages, didn't really understand exactly what they did. And what happened recently with the absolute meltdown of computer systems at various businesses where computer screens just went blue and they were non-functioning. This was a real mess in some cases, others just a little bit of an irritation. And so I was actually outside the United States. My wife and I were at a wedding in Montreal, Canada, when this happened. And I woke up to a text from Christa who said, "Hey, I know you're going to be flying back to the U.S. soon. You got to know this thing's going on." And so I start reading, and I get up, get dressed. My wife was still asleep. And I went straight to an ATM. Okay, anybody who's listened to me for a long time knows why I went straight to an ATM. Because one of the things that I was reading online is that banks were being affected. Not all banks, but banks were being affected. I wanted to make sure if electronic payments, credit cards, things like that weren't working, that I had cash. And so that's what I did. I went to an ATM. It was funny. It felt like being at Vegas and watching a slot machine roll. And was I going to get money or not? And I did. The money popped out. It turned out that was not something that I needed to be worried about. And as you may know, I have a supply of emergency cash hidden in our home because you never know when there's going to be an oops of some kind, or there's going to be something inspired likely by a state actor, could be a non-state actor, where they're trying to disrupt our economy, disrupt other economies, and bring systems down. In this case, this was completely self-inflicted. This was just an oops, but with consequences of all different kinds. So that's the first thing I did. And normally, if we were home, we have an emergency supply of non-perishable food. We have non-perishable dog food for our dogs. We have a supply of water. We've done basic things to be prepared, not for an ultra long, but for 2 weeks. That's been our thinking all along, is human beings adapt, organizations adapt, people figure out ways to do things. You think about the airlines that were issuing paper boarding passes, handwritten boarding passes in many cases, like they would have done in the analog era, the pre-computer era. Businesses do adapt. I think about when businesses that are owned by an individual or a family or whatever, their computer system goes down. What do? They figure out how to accept people's money and take orders manually. You go to a chain, they say, "Oh, we can't serve you today." Isn't that funny? That people who are running their own business adapt so much quicker than something that's corporate, that's systematized. When this happened, we were scheduled to fly on Delta Airlines. And as you may or may not be aware, Delta had a much bigger problem than turned out, with more canceled flights than all other airlines combined worldwide. I mean, their systems melted down and stayed melted down for days. So when I got back from the ATM, and I got to tell you something about me. One thing I don't do is skip a meal. I was so focused, I didn't even realize till later that I hadn't even had anything to eat for breakfast. I do not miss breakfast. But first thing I did was I tried to book a rental car to be able to drive back to the United States. No go. All companies sold out already from early that first morning. I then looked to see if there was a train we could take from Montreal, the U.S. No train. I then tried to book a bus. The bus services were all full for that day and the next day till that following night. I could take an all-night train to Albany, New York from Montreal. I don't know that that would have gotten me very far. But you do what you can and you adapt as best you can. And the most important thing is, as best you can, keep your wits about you and don't go into freak out mode. It's hard. You just keep working the problem as best you can. We have a friend who ended up stranded in, it's going to sound like a hardship, but stranded in Italy for 5 days to get home, and every day going to the airport thinking that was the day they were going to get home and didn't, and having to repeat that day after day and running up a lot of expenses. I mean, this was messy. And by the way, as a side thing, anyone who was stranded by this problem with CrowdStrike in Europe, or from the United States flying to Europe, there are European Union rules that are very specific that you're due a lot of compensation. U.S. flag airlines are going to try to ignore that they have legal responsibility under the European Union rules, but they do, and you have a right to seek those funds and go online and see. There's also a lot of contention about whether on your originating flight from the U.S. that you were supposed to take to Europe, do you have rights to claim? And I'm not a lawyer, I can't speak to that, but you want to try to make a claim based on the European Union rules because they are so much more favorable to the passenger than anything U.S. And I'm sure that we will answer a number of questions over time about the CrowdStrike situation. But just know life is always going to throw us curveballs. And we now depend so much on technology. And we have to think about how do we adapt when the technology lets us down. And we're going to have to be prepared for that from time to time. Think of it like a storm that comes out of nowhere, but it's a financial or technical storm.
All right.
And Christa, I didn't say we made it back just a day delayed in the middle of the night. We did very well just compared to other people. You intentionally changed to a day later, and you made it back with flights all around you canceled.
Yeah, I was so lucky.
So, well, I thought you have a direct line to the CEO of the airline.
Definitely not. I don't talk to Ed on the regular, so no.
So you just got lucky.
I got lucky, but I did. Once I saw that early in the morning, I moved my flight, and then all those flights were sold out like just a few hours later. And I texted you, and I texted Lane in case she got up before you, because I was like, oh my gosh.
So how surprised were you that the first thing I did was go to an
I was
ATM?
surprised. I thought you would have moved your flight immediately too, because of the situation. But that's a good point. I'm always learning from you, Clark. Even after all these years, I learn something new every day.
I hadn't been in Canada in a while. The Canadian money is really different than our money.
Yeah.
It used to be just, I mean, looked different, but it was the same kind of paper. It's really different now.
Yeah, I would also say if you're traveling, always bring an extra day or two of medication if you need it, things like that, because that has been a real problem for people not being able to take their medicine. I know in hospital systems, like surgeries were delayed and stuff, but if you're stranded somewhere with travel, you should always have extra medication and things like that.
All right, do you know how bad I am about that? I didn't even mention that. Do you know I take 2 weeks medicine always beyond the time of my trip?
That's smart.
Because you never know what could happen.
Yeah, baby formula, if you're using that kind of thing.
I don't use baby formula anymore.
Well, we're going to get you back on that. All right, let's go to some questions. This one's from David in California. Last year, we rescued a dog, but after 2 months, we found out she had 10 hitchhikers.
Oh.
Unexpectedly, we ended up with a new family of 4 in our retirement.
Wait, so what happened to the other 6 hitchhikers?
I think they found them good homes.
Oh, okay.
The rest got good homes. There we go. We live in the country, so the 4 have plenty of room. They are on a budget to keep them fed and in good health. I followed your suggestion for their kibble, and we'd supplement their diet with a mix of our own homemade pet food. Vet medication costs too much, so we started buying from Chewy. Regular purchases from Chewy have been exceptionally good, but prescription medication has been another story. Medications get thrown over the fence and left in the 112-degree temperatures for hours before we get a notification. We're on our 4th medication return and getting frustrated. They only ship FedEx, but lately they've subcontracted to another company. Many places refuse delivery from this company. Medication gets returned to Chewy, and then calls to Chewy customer service is a waste of time. No help, just scripted answers. I'm sure I'm not the only one dealing with this service. Are there any other suppliers for pet medications that I should investigate?
So you are getting your meds from the wrong C. Costco is the best deal that exists on pet meds. In fact, most Costcos now have a big sign behind the pharmacy, "We fill pet meds." And it's a huge opportunity because pet medications tend to be marked up potentially even more than human meds are. And so Costco has adopted this as a new niche that they sell pet meds at a big, big discount to what you're usually paying. Now, as far as the problem you're having with Chewy, we hear nothing but good things about Chewy. You obviously have found a weakness in Chewy's system, and it's something that I just wasn't even aware of. Have you ever heard about the problem with
I haven't, but I don't live in a rural area where things might get left out, so that's not good. All right, Lucas in California says, I received an email from GoFundMe updating me on their terms of service despite never having visited their website. What gives? I deleted and blocked the email. There was no unsubscribe button. My phone has At&t service. Could this all be related to the hack that happened with them recently? Or do you know what else I should do to look into this? Thanks for all you do. I love the show and all the wisdom and financial lessons the show teaches us.
So it's not likely this is because of a hack. There was an update in terms of service from GoFundMe recently, and it's possible that at some point, without even realizing you were donating to help somebody, could have been years ago, that the donation went through GoFundMe. That would be the likeliest reason, and almost certainly this is a benign thing, not part of any identity theft.
John in Texas says, Christa, I listened to the opening of one of your recent podcasts about how Clark loves going to Wawa, Sheetz, and Quick Trip. If you have the time and are around in Texas and can make it to a Buc-ee's, I highly recommend it. I'd love to hear Clark's reaction and for him to realize what is missing. And I also want to say, my brother-in-law, Joe, recently called me from a Buc-ee's asking if you had ever been to one and excitingly asking if you would talk about it because he was blown away. So
Buc-ee's is the greatest. In fact, I was at Buc-ee's twice in the last week in different states. I love Buc-ee's. They started in Texas. They're now in more and more states around the country. And imagine this, it's the size of a small Walmart with over 100 gas pumps, but it's not a gas station. It's not a convenience store. Buc-ee's is an experience. But here's my favorite thing about Buc-ee's. they treat their employees like gold. And they also have the cleanest bathrooms you'll ever go to.
Oh,
Have you ever
like
been to a Buc-ee's?
I have never been.
Okay.
We'll have to go on a road trip sometime.
Go to a Buc-ee's on a road trip. So Buc-ee's pays the people who clean the toilets more money than anybody but their managers. So
Buc-ee's.
that they can get really dedicated employees who just want to make a lot of money. They get benefits, vacation, 401k, all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome.
I mean, they are a phenomenon. And the food inside is just out of this world. So my favorite that I'm not allowed to eat anymore post-heart surgery is their breakfast biscuits. And then they have, I know the brisket's supposed to be a big deal. I don't like the brisket at all. And people look at me like, with the side eye that I don't like the brisket. But I love their burrito. Incredible. So it is a great place to stop. On July 4th, holiday, we were on the road and we were charging our Tesla at a Buc-ee's. And Lane does not like crowds. And it was the most crowded I'd ever seen one. And she was like spazzed out after she went in, used the bathroom, buy some snacks, comes out. She said, I can't do this. There's just too many people in here. It's not always like that. Mm-hmm. But the Tesla chargers they have, Christa, are ultra fast.
Okay.
So you need to try a Buc-ee's and see what the experience is like.
Okay.
So if you've not been to one, see, I'm obsessed, as you may have heard me in the past, like when we were talking about Wawa Sheets and Quick Trip. I'm obsessed with well-run convenience stores. This is way beyond a convenience store when you go to Buc-ee's. Coming up ahead, we're going to move to something really serious, and that is the debt troubles that a slice of the American people are in right now, and it's intensifying. We got to talk that through. So there's some sobering stuff going on with the credit card problems people are having, the delinquencies and all the rest. And one of the things is there's a stat that I've been quoting to you that the average credit card interest rate in the country is the highest it's ever been at 22%. But what's a really crazy stat that the Wall Street Journal has is that the interest rate of the typical person running balances is 29%. The average balance of the average person running a balance is a little over $6,000. Now that's just the average. There are people running massive credit card balances, and there are people running less than the 6,000, obviously, that are running balances, but the average is around 6,000. But what's hideous about this is that the amount, if the interest rates we're talking about now at 29%, when you're making a payment, almost everything you're paying is going to interest and has no impact on the balance. When credit card interest rates were lower, or let's say you're smart enough to have a credit union credit card instead of one from a bank, if you're running balances, the average credit union interest rate is half of the average interest rate from a bank. Half. Because a credit union is owned by its members and is not trying to gouge its members, which is what a bank's trying to do to make as much money as they can on anybody running a balance. So know that you're fighting from behind when you are running a balance because the interest rates have gone up so much, particularly if you're with a bank, yuck, and that money, that dollar, every dollar you pay, almost none of it goes to bring that balance down. Another thing is, how when people ask me, they ask me a lot of questions about credit scores, how to get the score up. And the thing that I talk about is how the second most important factor is how much of your available credit you're using. Well, there's a new study by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York that shows, based on what's known as utilization, what the likelihood is you're going to go delinquent on your debt. So the credit scoring model is set up that you're considered to be in good territory if the percent of your available credit, let's say you add up all your credit cards and the credit limit on all of them, just keep it simple, is $10,000. Keeping the amount charged in total below $3,000 gets you into good credit score territory. Well, the data from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York shows why so much emphasis on credit score is based on how much of the credit available to you you're using. And they found that if you use 20% or less of your available credit, there's only a 1% chance that you are going to go delinquent on your debt. On the other hand, if you're using 60% or more, there's a 15% chance you're going to go delinquent. Using 90% or more, there's about a 35% chance you're going to go delinquent. So this is why you hear me talk again and again and again about holding down how much of your available credit you're using, because the patterns that emerge is that you hit a rough patch. You get ill, you have a big repair at your house, you get laid off. We're going to see more layoffs now that the job market is still strong but normalizing. It's not the intensely strong job market it was, so there's more chance of layoffs. So you're pricing your life for perfection when you're using too much of your available credit, because then you use more of it to deal with the setback in your life or emergency in your life, and before you know it, you're in completely over your head. So that's why one of the most important financial steps you can take in your life is to suppress how much credit card debt you accumulate, how much credit card debt you have. The more you can hold that down, the profiles show the healthier your financial picture won't just be, but will remain. And nobody got rich paying Visa or MasterCard. I always used to say, nobody ever got rich paying Visa or MasterCard 18%. Well, let me tell you, it's even worse at 29%. And if your credit standing is good, you have a decent credit score, and you don't yet have a credit card from a credit union, get one. Get one. People get the credit cards that are solicited, that are marketed to them. They don't get the cards that are best for them.
Okay, ready for some more questions?
I'm ready.
This one came in from Dan in Illinois. My wife couldn't work for a little while due to ankle surgery, and we racked up some credit card debt.
I hope her ankle's okay.
My largest card has a $20,000 limit, and I have about $18,000 on it. Does it make sense to buy things I normally use my debit card for and just pay the charge right away while also rounding up to the nearest $10 amount or so? Example, I buy $75 in gas and I pay $80 toward the card. The interest rate on the card is 8.9%. I'm not sure if a lower rate makes a difference or not. I also assume I need to make my minimum payment on top of the extra roundups. Let me know if you think this will work to pay this down.
So Dan, first of all, think about what you started with here. Interest rate of 8.9, is that what you said? 8.9 is remarkably favorable today. That's a fantastic interest rate on a credit card, which is an unsecured debt. But I'm going to say something harsh. Because you're using 90% of your available credit, going back to the example I gave, that puts you in dangerous territory. I would rather you not use the credit card at all and use your, I'm going to say it, use the piece of trash fake Visa or fake MasterCard, the debit card. And your emphasis needs to be on getting that balance down, recovering from that costs that you incurred from your wife's surgery that, again, I hope was successful. And what I would like you to do is, instead of paying the minimum payment or more than that once a month, I want you to pay that amount every 2 weeks. Whatever the minimum is, if that's all you can pay is the minimum, divide it in two and keep paying it every 2 weeks, because that 8.9% interest, even though it's more favorable than the marketplace, 1/3 of the marketplace interest rate, you're paying interest daily, and you will have a math benefit starting to pay that balance down if you pay half of a monthly minimum every 2 weeks. But listen to this. That's what I want you to pay going forward, because as that balance goes down, paying half of what right now is today's payment every 2 weeks means that you will be paying steadily more principal and less interest by paying half a payment every 2 weeks. And over the course of a year, you will have paid effectively one additional monthly payment by paying every 2 weeks instead of paying twice a month or paying once a month. So the key is not to use the card right now, because the amount of your available credit you're using puts you into dangerous territory.
Matthew in Tennessee says, another listener recently wrote in about email newsletters and the danger of giving someone your email address. Here's a tip. Don't use email for receiving newsletters. Most sites publish an RSS feed, which you can read using a free RSS reader.
Okay, that's so funny, Christa. We haven't had somebody say something about really simple syndication in how many years?
My favorite is Feedly, but what about the few sites that only publish their updates via email, like the Clark Daily newsletter? For that, there's a free service called Kill the Newsletter. It gives you a custom email address you use to sign up for the newsletter, and it will convert the email to an RSS feed for you. No need to give your precious email address to someone else and fill up your inbox.
Okay, I really love your thinking. I love people who come up with creative solutions. And is it costly for us to do
I don't think it's
RSS?
costly. I asked the person in charge of our tech with the newsletters about it. I imagine the only thing I could think of is that, Google has really changed their algorithm and hurt the traffic that we get to the website. And so doing the newsletter the way we do and having advertisers in it, like people who write long-form newsletters, they have sponsored posts within that newsletter that they make money from, where you don't go to their site. And I assume an RSS feed would just have the posts that we put in the site, so that would be okay. So we'll see if we can do it, but I'm guessing that might be part of why we haven't done it yet.
The Google thing has been brutal for a lot of websites have shut down because of what Google did. Google's doing something where they're trying to, when somebody does a search inquiry, try to keep them inside Google instead of giving referral out, or only giving it to extremely large
right. The bigger the site, the bigger the publisher. They've done a few things. They killed a lot of small publishers that are focused on, like, we know people who lost their business. One guy who wrote a whole site about just cell phone deals, and his traffic
was the best there was.
His traffic
on cell
went
phones.
to almost nothing, in months. And we know a few other people this happened to too. And so they favored big publishers. Then they did this deal with Reddit, where you're getting these Reddit and Quora posts at the top of your feed, and now there's the AI summary. And so it's really hard to get traffic through Google.
And it also is really hard to see Google living up to its do no evil kind of thing. Oh, well.
Andrew in New York says, our family has been traveling a lot recently, and we've been taking your advice on taking pictures of our rental car while still in the rental lot and when we return the car. How long do you suggest saving these pictures for?
2 months. The reason 2 months is the time period you want to save the video you shoot or the pictures you take of a rental car is that my experience is that most UFO claims that show up out of nowhere occur sometime around 4 weeks, generally longest 6 weeks. You'd have to be really unlucky in life's lottery that it would happen after 2 months, that a weird bill would show up from a rental car company saying you dented the fender or whatever. Really, you can't prevent every last eventuality in life. So it's arbitrary, but I keep the images from a rental car 2 months and then get rid of them. This is really important. So I had something, I forgot to mention this, Christa. We had a rental car that we got into, and we always inspect it, and the windshield had damage to it. So I asked for it to be noted on the contract that the windshield had damage, because the car rental companies love selling you new windshields. And so the person at the gate said, "You can't have the car." I said, "What?" "I just want you to note that there's damage to the windshield." She said, "We got fined for sending vehicles out with damaged windshields. You have to go back in and get another car." And so I did, but I learned years ago, if there's serious damage to a car, it's not good enough just to have it noted. You really want those pictures, and at the very least, you want it always noted before you leave the rental plaza what damage is there, and then document the condition you've returned the vehicle. And I always take a picture of the fuel gauge as well, showing that it's full, because I always go and fill the car before I return it, because the car rental companies rip you off to the max if you don't fill the vehicle with gasoline yourself. So most times you're going to rent a car, everything's going to be great. It's going to be fine. And so often you hear these negative stories. I want to tell you, most times life's just great. Just sometimes it's not. So you have to be prepared for that. And if something's happening in your life that's not feeling great right now and you don't know what to do, you need advice, guidance, we got it for you, and it's free from our Team Clark Consumer Action Center that serves you 30 hours each week with free one-on-one advice and guidance. If you want to know how to get that free advice, go to clark.com/CAC and know what we're about. You learning ways to save more, spend less, and avoid getting ripped off. And we'll see you tomorrow.